marrying a plumber. How embarrassing. My mother spat over the phone. My father didn't even speak. He just hung up, and my sister, she laughed, who'd be caught dead at that wedding. They didn't just disapprove, they boycotted my wedding. No calls, no messages, not a single chair reserved for them. They said I was a disgrace to the family, that I had ruined our reputation, so I walked the aisle alone. No proud father to give me away, no mother dabbing tears of joy, just silence where love should have been. But here's what they didn't know: the man they called a plumber. He wasn't just a plumber. He was a former Wellesley tech engineer, a systems genius who had walked away from corporate wealth to build something on his own terms. And just several weeks after our wedding, his name and our wedding aired on national television, over 100 missed calls, all from the people who said I wasn't worth their time. Now they were begging for mine. If you've ever been underestimated, shamed for who you love, or cast aside by the very people who should support you, most stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll see how one choice, one person, and one powerful truth can turn shame into pride and silence into panic. This isn't just a story about love, it's a story about revenge. The kind of revenge that doesn't raise its voice but rises above. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Alara Vance was 28 years old, a senior financial advisor at a respected mid-sized firm in Anya. She lived in a modest but elegant apartment in Anya Hills, paid off entirely through her own hard work. Alara had always carried herself with quiet dignity, preferring books to small talk and substance over show. Raised in one of Alderwood's most prominent families, she had long since learned that her values didn't align with the ones she was brought up to worship. Her parents, Malcolm and Serafina Vance, were social fixtures deeply entrenched in the rituals of upper-class appearance, where nameplates on charity walls meant more than warmth at the dinner table. Her younger sister, Astrid, was the shining star of the family, always the center of attention, effortlessly charming and seemingly born to walk red carpets and country club galas. Alara, by contrast, had always been responsible in the way that was praised, but never celebrated, as she dialed the number to her parents' estate. Her hands trembled, not from uncertainty, but from something deeper. Older, a lifetime of trying to prove herself worthy still hadn't shaken the heaviness that followed her into adulthood. This call wasn't a plea. She wasn't begging. It was an invitation, an act of Alara of decency. She had decided to offer them one more chance. The phone rang 3 times before Serafina picked up. Her voice was calm, clipped, and unmistakably cold. Alara, her mother said, as though answering a call from a distant acquaintance. "Hi, Mom." Alara began carefully. "I just wanted to call and, well, I wanted to let you know. The wedding's the following weekend. I wanted you and Dad to know you're invited. It would mean a lot if you came." There was a pause, but not the kind that comes from surprise or emotion. This was the kind of pause that came from calculation. Serafina inhaled slowly. "The following weekend." She repeated as if the date were somehow offensive. "Yes," Alara said more firmly now, "at Lakeside Pavilion. It's going to be a small ceremony, just a few friends, and, well, hopefully, family." That's when the tone shifted. Serafina's voice sharpened. "You're really going through with this?" With him, she asked, the word him carrying a disdain that made Alara's stomach tighten. Alara stayed calm. "Yes, with Leo." A scoff, that unmistakable sound of judgment dressed as surprise. "Alara marrying a plumber. Honestly, what do you expect us to do? Smile and pretend you're not dragging the Vance name through the M mud? I mean, really, how embarrassing." Alara closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Leo is a good man. He's kind, smart, and he treats me with respect. I'm sure he fixes pipes beautifully," Serafina retorted. "But we won't be parading around in some garden wedding pretending this isn't a complete disaster." Alara didn't respond to the insult she'd expected. This hadn't she. At that moment, another voice joined in from the background. Astrid laughing. "Oh my God," Astrid said loud enough to be heard through the line, "who'd be caught dead at that wedding, seriously." Alara's heart clenched, not because it hurt in a new way, but because it hurt in the same old way, the way it always had: dismissal dressed up as family tradition. She took a breath. "Okay," she said quietly. "I understand. I just wanted to give you the chance before she could finish." She heard her father's voice in the distance. "Who is it, your daughter?" Serafina said coolly. "Inviting us to her plumber wedding." There was no response from him, no defense, no question, just silence. Alara hung up. She didn't cry. Immediately, she just sat still, the weight of the call settling in her chest like a familiar stone. It was one thing to suspect you didn't matter to the people who raised you. It was another to hear them confirm it without hesitation that night as she finalized the last details of the wedding guest list. With her best friend Sarah, she quietly removed 3 names: Serafina Vance Malcolm, Vance, Astrid Vance. She stared at the blank lines where their names used to be. She didn't delete them in anger, she simply let them go. The day of the wedding arrived with a soft golden light filtering through the trees. The garden was in full bloom. White folding chairs lined either side of a delicate aisle draped in wildflowers. Guests whispered in anticipation, a gentle hum of warmth and love. 3 chairs in the front row remained empty. Alara stood behind the pavilion door, dressed in a simple ivory gown, her hair pinned with pearls. She could hear the music start the soft swell of strings that had always made her imagine a different day, a different family. But today was real. Today was hers. And as the doors opened and every eye turned toward her, Alara walked down the aisle alone. No father on her arm, no mother waiting with a tearful smile, no sister fussing with the train of her dress, just her walking into her new life with the strength she had built from every moment they tried to tear her down. And still she smiled because this was no longer about what they thought of her. It was about what she had finally learned to think of herself. Alara Vance had always understood what it meant to be a Vance at 25 years old. She had spent a lifetime watching her last name open doors for everyone except herself. To the outside world, the Vances were more than a family. They were an institution. Their estate, nestled in the leafy hills of Alderwood Heights, was as polished and impenetrable as their reputation. Alara was the eldest daughter of Malcolm and Serafina, Vance pillars of high society. Malcolm, with his silver hair and perfectly tailored suits, was the head of Vance Holdings, a real estate empire stretching from Alderwood to Metropolis. Serafina, always poised with pearls and pressed silk blouses, chaired one of the region's most prestigious philanthropic foundations. Magazines featured her annual charity galas, while Malcolm was quoted in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal on urban development trends at Sunday services. They always sat in the front pew, whispering hellos to the mayor and the bank presidents. From the moment Alara could walk in, patent leather shoes, her role was clear: uphold the Vance image. There was no space for loud laughter, messy questions, or emotional honesty. Presentation came first. Her mother's favorite phrase, "We don't air our laundry, dear, we press." It was both a warning and a way of life. And then there was Astrid, 2 years younger than Alara. Astrid was everything Serafina and Malcolm celebrated: bright-eyed, charismatic, and effortlessly fashionable. Astrid understood the world of appearances. Instinctively, she twirled through ballroom fundraisers and luxury brunches. With ease at 16, she was gifted a brand new convertible because she made cheer. Captain Alara, in contrast, had received a check for $50 and a reminder to be practical. "Astrid needs to be seen, you like books," her mother had said, with a smile. Too sweet to challenge, Alara had always been bookish, quiet and observant. She wasn't the girl who fit into designer dresses or sparkled under chandeliers. She preferred libraries to luncheons, lectures over galas, her achievements valedictorian at St. Anne's Academy, full scholarship to Wellesley Tech. Early promotion at a private wealth management firm were met with polite nods, not celebration. Her parents rarely attended her events, citing scheduling conflicts or more strategic appearances. Family dinners were the worst formal affairs, with rigid seating arrangements and crystal glassware. They looked like something from a lifestyle magazine, but behind the bone, china and glistening silverware, was an air thick with unspoken judgment. Serafina would gently correct Alara's posture, while Astrid recounted a story about a fashion internship in Paris. Malcolm might ask Alara about work, only to cut her off with an anecdote about his own latest investment win. The words were always soft, but the message cut like ice. "You don't belong in this world we built still." For many years, Alara tried. She bought muted dresses and memorized names of her father's associates. She stood silently beside her mother at fundraisers, smiling through the ache in her cheeks. She learned to fold her ambition into quiet efficiency, hoping one day they'd notice, hoping one day she'd be enough. But the compliments never came. Not when she graduated with honors, not when she paid off her student loans, not when she bought her first condo without asking for a dime. Alara is so responsible. Serafina would say to her friends in that same tone people used when describing a reliable housekeeper. That's when Alara began to change. It didn't happen overnight, but sometime after 23, after another Christmas, watching Astrid receive diamond earrings while she unwrapped a planner, something in her cracked quietly. The yearning to be chosen, to be seen, began to fade. She started skipping family dinners. She stopped justifying her choices. She let her hair grow long dressed. How she liked and filled her home with things that made her happy, not things that made her parents proud. By the time she met Leo, the man her family would soon call the plumber, she had already begun building a life separate from theirs. It was quiet, unpolished, but deeply her own. And yet standing at the altar with empty chairs, where her family should have been, the sting returned. Their absence wasn't just rejection, it was confirmation of what Alara had always suspected. In the Vance household, love was not unconditional. It was earned, and she had never earned it. But they were wrong about one thing: that wedding, small and simple, would become the beginning of a story no one could have predicted, and soon the entire country would know it. Alara Vance had spent most of her adult life carefully building a quiet, independent world away from the cold corridors of her parents' mansion. She lived in a modest apartment in Willow Creek, furnished not with designer couches or antique china, but with shelves of books, thrifted art, and the soft creaks of a life earned. Not gifted, her job at a mid-tier accounting firm wasn't glamorous, but she was respected, steady, and utterly self-reliant. For someone who'd grown up with staff waiting on every whim, that self-sufficiency was her proudest achievement. One unusually cold April morning, the quiet in her apartment was shattered by a gurgling, then a sharp hiss from behind the bathroom wall. By the time she reached the door, water had begun to pool across the tile and seep toward her bedroom carpet. She scrambled for towels, then her phone. The emergency plumbing service promised someone within the hour. 47 minutes later, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find a man in worn work boots, jeans, and a navy shirt with a faded Novak Mechanical Services patch stitched over his heart. He was tall, with dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the edges, and his hands large, calloused, gripped a heavy toolbox like it weighed nothing. "Leo Novak," he said with a nod. Eyes warm. "You've got yourself a full-blown leak, huh?" Alara offered a polite smile, stepping aside. "Bathrooms this way. It's been spraying like a fountain." "Don't worry," Leo said, already rolling up his sleeves. "We'll stop the tropical storm situation before it hits the bedroom." He moved with quiet confidence, shutting off valves, assessing damage, wiping his hands clean between adjustments. Alara found herself watching not just with gratitude, but a strange curiosity. He wasn't flustered, didn't grunt or swear. Under his breath, he whistled lightly while he worked. There was a calm about him that didn't match the stereotype she expected. When he finished, he stood up, brushing dust from his jeans. "You're all set for now, but this building's got pipes older than your thermostat. I'd get the whole thing inspected." "If I were you," she chuckled. "You make it sound so urgent." He grinned. "Plumbing emergencies don't RSVP. They just show up." There was a pause. Then Alara asked, almost without thinking, "Would you like some coffee?" Leo blinked, slightly surprised, then nodded. "If it's not too much trouble." They sat at her small kitchen table, steam rising between chipped mugs. She learned he lived just across town, had taken over his late father's business, and liked working with his hands. He spoke of plumbing with surprising insight, likening it to a system of trust. Everything flows right when every connection is honest. His words lingered with her long after he left. The next day, a thank you text turned into a conversation about books. Leo mentioned he was rereading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Alara sent back a quote from the book. He replied with another, and just like that, something unspoken shifted between them. Their first date was a quiet walk in Heritage Park. Leo wore the same work boots and brought her a small bunch of wildflowers. He picked along the way. They wandered between gardens and talked about their favorite books, their childhoods, the people they used to be. What struck Alara wasn't just how smart he was. It was how present. Leo didn't perform, didn't impress for the sake of it. He listened, really listened, when they passed a bench by the sunken grove. He asked her to sit, pulled a small pocket chessboard from his bag, and challenged her to a game. They went on dates that weren't Instagram-worthy, but felt real farmers markets use bookstores, takeout eaten on park benches, Sunday breakfast made together in silence and smiles. Alara, for the first time in years, felt seen, not evaluated, but she kept one thing hidden, her last name. He knew her as Alara Sterling, a decision she made the first time she saw how his shoulders tensed at the mention of rich kids in Range Rovers who looked down on tradesmen. She wasn't ashamed of him, quite the opposite, but she feared what he'd think of her past of the Vance name. Still, it didn't stop her from falling, and it didn't stop him from showing up every morning with coffee, fixing her bookshelf when it tilted, or asking about her day, like it mattered more than anything else. And so, in the quiet glow of ordinary days, the girl whose family measured love in social capital fell in love with the man who measured it in effort, care, and small, steady actions. What Alara didn't know, what neither of them could have imagined, was how much louder the world would get when her two lives finally collided. A few months into their relationship, Alara knew it was time she had delayed it. Long enough, it was time for Leo to meet her family. He didn't pressure her, never asked why. He hadn't yet been introduced to the parents, but Alara saw the way his eyes lingered when he noticed framed photos at her place. Black tie galas, holiday dinners in large rooms with gold-plated chandeliers. He knew she came from a different world. What he didn't know was just how little that world had ever made room for her, or for anyone like him. When she finally told her mother she'd be bringing a guest to Sunday dinner, Serafina's voice was pleasant but edged. "Oh, and who is this mystery man?" "A friend, someone I've been seeing." "I see, and what does this friend do for a living?" "He owns a small business," Alara said, choosing her words carefully. "Plumbing services." There was a beat of silence and then a clipped response. "Lovely, we'll see you both at 6. The Vance family estate in Old Alderwood stood exactly as Alara remembered it. Immaculate, symmetrical, proud Leo wore his best blazer, pressed shirt, and polished shoes. Still, Alara could feel his hesitation as they approached the massive front door. She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens in there, you're not alone." Serafina greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Leo," she said, offering her hand like she was presenting a napkin. Her gaze lingered on the toolbox-shaped calluses on his fingers. "We don't often have guests from hands-on professions." Leo smiled politely. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Vance." Malcolm stood a few steps back, arms folded. Was all he said in response before turning toward the dining room. Astrid swept in shortly after her perfume arriving. Before she did, "Well, well. Alara's got herself a man," she said with a smirk, eyes raking over Leo like he was a curiosity in a glass case. "So, Leo, what do you do?" He answered calmly. "I run a plumbing and HVAC business. We specialize in residential systems, energy efficiency upgrades." Astrid interrupted with a laugh. "Wow, Bet, that's fun. When people clog up their sinks with spaghetti, I can barely change a light bulb." She turned to Alara. "You always did like fixing broken things." The table was beautifully set with porcelain dishes, crystal glasses, and 5 courses. No one truly enjoyed. The conversation moved around Leo like he wasn't there. Malcolm discussed stock indexes. Serafina talked about a charity brunch she hosted with 2 senators. Astrid bragged about her new boyfriend Oliver, a financial consultant on Wall Street. "He just closed a deal with a startup valued at $60 million, she said, glancing meaningfully at Leo. "He's flying me to Napa Valley next weekend at one point." Serafina turned to Leo with a rehearsed smile. "So Leo, doing that sort of work, do you get retirement benefits? Or do you just keep going until your knees give out?" Alara froze. Leo paused, setting down his fork. "Well, I invest through my SEP IRA, and I've structured the business to run without me. Eventually, I believe in long-term planning." Serafina blinked. "How pragmatic of you." Malcolm said nothing the entire evening, not a word. Not a look. Just silence by dessert. Alara's throat felt tight. She watched the family around her laugh and drink wine like nothing was amiss, as if they hadn't just systematically diminished the man she loved. Leo never raised his voice, never let the digs land. He answered politely, held her hand under the table, and smiled at her between courses like they were in on a private joke. When they finally stepped back into the night air, Alara felt the burn rise in her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They were awful." Leo stopped beside the car and turned to her. his voice soft but firm. Ilara, I didn't expect anything different. They don't have to understand me. They don't have to like me, but it's not fair. They don't have to believe in what I do, he continued. Because you do, and that's enough for me. She stared at him, eyes filling you. Sure, he nodded absolutely. Let them look down, they don't know what they're missing, as they drove away from the Vance estate. Ilara looked at the man beside her, kind, grounded, unshaken. She thought of all the people her family had celebrated over the years, shallow men with expensive suits and empty values, and realized with startling clarity that Leo was richer than any of them, and one day the world would see it too. The leaves were just starting to turn that soft golden amber when Leo led Ilara down a quiet wooded path behind the old state park in Willow Creek East. The afternoon sun streamed through the trees, casting a warm light over the earth, and crunching leaves muffled their footsteps. Ilara had always found comfort in nature, its quiet, its patience, its lack of judgment, and perhaps that's why Leo chose this place. This moment, he paused near a small clearing where someone had placed a weathered wooden bench years ago, half claimed by the roots of a nearby tree. Leo turned to her with a nervous smile. There was no crowd, no photographer hiding in the bushes, no flash or spectacle. Just them, the breeze, and a single small velvet box in his hand. Ilara Vance. He began, his voice soft but steady. You see people, not just their job, their money, their family name. You see them, and you saw me. Will you marry me? Ilara's heart, already full, overflowed. She didn't need diamonds or declarations. The man kneeling before her with calloused hands and a gentle heart was everything she never knew she needed. Yes, she whispered, pulling him up into a kiss 1,000 times. Yes. The ring wasn't ornate. It was modest with a tiny opal stone, but it shimmered in the sunlight, like a secret just between them. That evening, still wearing the same smile she'd had in the woods, Ilara sat on her small apartment couch, with the phone pressed tightly to her ear. She was calling to tell her parents not for their approval. She had long stopped expecting that, but because they were still her parents and some part of her, whether foolish or brave, thought maybe they would surprise her. Serafina answered on the third ring. Mother, I'm calling to tell you. Leo proposed. We're engaged. There was a pause, then a sharp exhale on the other end. Well, Serafina said, her voice clipped and cool. I suppose. Congratulations are in order. Good luck to you and your plumber. But don't expect us to be part of that circus we won't be attending. Ilara bit her lip hard, the familiar sting rising. It's not a circus. It's my wedding. I just hope you realize what you're doing. Serafina continued. People will talk. It's already hard. Enough to explain your choices now? This I don't care what people think, Ilara said, trying to steady her voice. Well, we do. Her mother snapped. Then came the click of the call ending. Ilara sat in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to her ear. She tried her father's number later. It rang and rang. No answer. No voicemail. He wouldn't even give her. That moments later, a notification buzzed on her screen. The family group chat lit up, one message from Astrid. It was a single emoji. A laughing face. Ilara stared at it. No words, no congratulations, no attempt at sisterhood. Just mockery dressed in pixels. The tears came, but not like before. These weren't tears of self-doubt. These were tears of confirmation. The walls that had long been cracking had finally collapsed. They weren't coming to the wedding, not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't, because she had chosen love over legacy. And so for the first time in her life, Ilara made a decision without looking back. She deleted the group chat, then she pulled out a notepad and began writing names. Not of the people she had lost, but the people she still had, friends who called just to check in, her coworker, who always remembered her birthday, Leo's mother who sent her soup when she had the flu. A new guest list was born. No Serafina, no Malcolm, no Astrid. She and Leo would marry on their terms, surrounded by love, not bloodlines. They would build a family, not from expectations or prestige, but from truth and choice. The Vances would not be invited, and for the first time, that didn't feel like a tragedy. It felt like peace. The morning of Ilara Vance's wedding began quietly with a faint mist clinging to the trees in a stillness that felt both peaceful and hollow. She sat by the window of a modest rental cottage near the garden venue, staring out at the autumn leaves as they trembled in the breeze. Her wedding gown hung nearby, simple ivory chiffon, No embroidery, no glitter, just soft flowing fabric and lace along the edges, chosen not for spectacle, but for sincerity. There were no stylists bustling around her, no flurry of champagne glasses or family laughter. It was just Alara, alone with her thoughts. Sarah, her best friend since college, arrived with a warm hug and a bag of bagels. She had insisted on staying by Alara's side since the proposal offering her support, without conditions or questions, nervous. She asked gently, handing Alara a cup of tea. Alara gave a soft smile, not about marrying him, just about everything else. They set up the modest decorations themselves with wildflowers from a local farm and string lights wrapped carefully around the pergola. There were no florists, no planners, just the two of them and a few friends who had arrived early to help set the chairs in place. A row of seats was reserved at the front, each one bearing a crisp white sign, Mother of the Bride, Father of the Bride's Sister, all left empty. Alara didn't cry. She had done all her crying months ago, after her family disowned her engagement and cut her off, like an embarrassment. Today wasn't for them, it was for her. And Leo. Leo was waiting beneath the pergola in a navy suit and silver tie, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked calm, even joyful, as if no void could reach him today. Alara peeked out from behind the curtain of trees, taking a deep breath. Then came the sound of hurried footsteps behind her. Alara, she turned around. Startled, a man stood there. In a charcoal suit slightly wrinkled from travel, his gray hair was windblown and his eyes gentle but unsure. Searched her face. "Uncle George," she whispered, unsure if she believed it. "I know I wasn't invited," he said, catching his breath. "But when your father told me he wasn't coming, I couldn't let you walk down the aisle alone." Alara froze. She hadn't seen her father's younger brother in years. He had always been the odd one in the family. Not polished, not interested in country clubs or charity galas, but he had once taught her how to ride a bike when she was 6, holding the seat while she wobbled down their long driveway, encouraging her when her father had simply shrugged. "You came all this way?" she asked, voice trembling. "I took the first train I could," he said. "If that offer still stands, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." Tears pricked at her eyes, and for the first time that day, they didn't fall from sadness? She nodded. "I'd love that." As the music began, just a soft violin from a friend of Sarah's. Alara took her uncle's arm the moment she stepped into the aisle. The scattered guests stood turning to see her. Some were friends, others coworkers, neighbors, even a few of Leo's clients. People who had chosen to be there not out of obligation but care. Each step toward Leo felt lighter than the last. Leo's face lit up when he saw her not in awe of the dress or the moment, but of her. She saw it in his eyes. Admiration, gratitude. Love, the kind of look she'd never seen from her own parents when she reached him. Uncle George gently placed her hand into Leo's. "Take good care of her," he said softly. Leo nodded. "With everything I have." The ceremony began under the rustling canopy of trees. The officiant, a retired school teacher who had known Alara since childhood, spoke warmly of commitment and resilience. Then came the vows. Leo took her hands and looked her in the eye. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled just slightly. "I promise to love you, not just for who you are today, but for every version of you that will grow in the years ahead. I promise to support your dreams, to speak gently, even when I'm angry, and to never let a single day go by without reminding you that you are enough." Alara's breath caught in her throat. She managed to return her vows with equal honesty. No rehearsed lines, just the truth of what they had built together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, there were cheers, small but real. They kissed beneath the sky, just beginning to turn gold with the afternoon sun. Later, as they posed for a photo with their closest, friends gathered around them and wildflowers in their hands. Alara leaned into Leo's shoulder. A photographer caught the moment just as Leo leaned in and whispered in her ear, "I have a plan for what comes next." She turned to look at him, puzzled. He smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "A surprise, but you'll like it." She laughed softly. "Is this a marriage or a mystery novel?" "Both," he said, and in that moment, with his hand in hers and no trace of her family in sight, Alara realized something profound. You don't need a full church or a famous last name to begin a real marriage. You just need the truth and someone who stands beside you without wavering, and she had both. Alara had always respected Leo's quiet humility. It was one of the reasons she had fallen for him. in the first place. He never boasted, never tried to prove himself to anyone. So when she stumbled across the drawer in their small study one rainy Saturday afternoon, she wasn't expecting secrets. Certainly not ones that would shake the foundation of everything she thought. She knew. She had been tidying up, looking for a spare charger cord. Leo was out running errands, and Alara opened the bottom drawer of his old wooden desk. The one he always kept neatly closed but never locked inside was a leather folder thick and worn. She hesitated, then slid it open. On top was a diploma Wellesley Tech Bachelor of Science in Mechanical and Electrical Engineering, Leo and Novak. Her heart skipped. Beneath it were several neatly labeled documents. U.S. Patent Office approvals diagrams of a system labeled Hydroflow Solutions with dense technical annotations. She couldn't entirely follow several pages of email correspondences with people from firms like Everest Capital and Terra Fund, names she'd heard on Bloomberg Investors. Alara sat down stunned. Leo and Wellesley Tech engineer, a man with active patents talking to venture capital firms. He'd always introduced himself simply, "I run my dad's plumbing business," that was it. No bravado, no clarification, just a smile and rolled sleeves. She had believed him, trusted him, loved him. But why didn't he tell her when Leo came home later, groceries in one hand, rain on his jacket? He instantly noticed her sitting at the kitchen table with the document spread out in front of her. His face went still. "I guess I owe you an explanation," he said quietly, setting the bags down. Alara nodded too. Shaken to speak, he sat across from her, hands folded, eyes soft. "I went to Wellesley Tech. I spent 5 years working as a senior engineer for a defense contractor outside the district capital. High clearance projects, long hours, long shadows. I was good at it, but I hated the politics, the pressure, the feeling, like I was just moving pieces in someone else's game." He paused, studying her reaction when my dad had a heart attack. "I came home to help with the business plan to stay a few months. That was some years ago." Alara's voice was quiet and Hydroflow Solutions. He smiled faintly. "Something I started sketching out in the district capital, but only built seriously. Once I came back, a modular water conservation system. Smart tech meets plumbing infrastructure. I've been testing it in a few homes, building it in between service calls." "You're not just a plumber," she whispered, not accusingly, but as if confirming it to herself. "No," he agreed. "But I am a plumber. I just didn't think that mattered. Not at first. I liked that you saw me for who I was, that you didn't need the resume, the degrees, the startup. I didn't want to lead with all this because, well, frankly, because people do exactly what your family did. They see a title, not a man." Her throat tightened. "So you just never planned to tell me?" He exhaled. "I planned to, yes. I just didn't want it to feel like a sales pitch." And there was another reason. Leo reached into the folder and pulled out an older print out of an email, something she hadn't seen yet. He slid it across the table. It was a message exchange from Serafina Vance. Subject line: "Prospective young men." Astrid's list dated nearly 18 months before Alara met Leo. She scanned it. Her mother had been coordinating introductions for Astrid, her golden child sister, with acceptable young men from respected families. Someone had floated Leo's name, noting his education, but Serafina's reply was as sharp as it was damning. "Wellesley Tech is impressive, but he runs a plumbing company now. Not our kind of people. Let's keep looking." Alara's hand trembled. "You were almost considered for Astrid." Leo gave a small, ironic smile. "Isn't that something your mother and sister knew who I was? They knew I had credentials, but because I was living in jeans and fixing broken sinks, I wasn't good enough. And then I brought you to dinner and they didn't even recognize you." He nodded. "Exactly. I knew your last name, Alara, when we started getting serious. I put it together, but I didn't say anything because I wanted you to choose me. Not the version of me your family might approve of." Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, and I did. He reached across the table and took her hand. Gently, "That's all that matters. I didn't choose their approval. I chose you. And if I have to, I'll keep choosing you every day." Alara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The shame, the dismissal, the loneliness she'd carried from her family's rejection. It melted in that moment, replaced by something far more powerful: pride. Not in Leo's degrees or his startup potential, but in his courage, his values, his quiet refusal to let anyone else define his worth. They had tried to discard him, tried to discard her, But love, when built on truth and respect, has a gravity all its own. And now she knew they hadn't just underestimated Leo, they had underestimated her too, and they were about to see just how wrong they'd been. For several weeks after their quiet wedding, Ilara and Leo settled into married life. With calm determination, they had no lavish honeymoon, no gifts from family, no proud toast from the bride's father. But what they did have, each other shared dinners, late-night laughter, and quiet mornings, was more real than anything Ilara had known growing up in the Vance household. One crisp weekday morning, Ilara woke to find Leo standing in the kitchen dressed in a dark blue suit she had never seen before. His usual work boots were replaced by polished brown Oxfords, and instead of his embroidered Novak mechanical shirt, he wore a sleek minimal name badge that simply read, Leo Novak, founder and CEO, Hydroflow Solutions. You're up early, she said, rubbing sleep from her eyes. He smiled as he handed her a mug of coffee. Today's the Urban Sustainability Summit, remember? Ilara blinked. The one in the district capital. Leo nodded. They bumped my panel to main stage national coverage. She sat upright. National like major news, he grinned. Major network and financial news outlets innovation feature. Apparently water is suddenly sexy that afternoon, as Ilara sat on the living room couch flipping between news channels. Her heart thudded when Leo appeared on screen. The headline read, Wellesley tech engineer turned plumber, now leading national water innovation. The broadcast cut to Leo standing at a podium at the National Conference on Sustainable Infrastructure. Behind him was a digital rendering of the Hydroflow Solution System, a sleek smart grid that promised to reduce residential water usage by 60% while preserving natural flow pressure and functionality. Growing up, I watched my father fix broken pipes in homes that hadn't seen repairmen in decades. Leo said, voice clear, steady. I realized America's water problem isn't just technical. Its human. Hydroflow Solutions isn't just about saving water, it's about restoring dignity to everyday infrastructure. Applause erupted. The camera panned to senators, corporate executives, environmental advocates, every one of them nodding in admiration. Then came the segment's climax. The anchor's voice softened as she introduced a photo, and behind every great innovator is often a quiet love story. Leo and his wife Ilara Novak, formerly Ilara Vance, were married in a small ceremony in the region last fall. The couple declined a traditional wedding, choosing instead to celebrate with close friends. Their story has since gone viral on social media as a symbol of humility, simplicity, and values-driven living. The screen filled with a photo Ilara had nearly forgotten existed, her in a lace dress, no makeup, but glowing, smiling up at Leo as he gently brushed a leaf from her hair. In the background were mason jars of wildflowers and fairy lights strung across old oak beams. Ilara stared at the screen, stunned. The image lingered for only seconds, but those seconds changed everything when she finally picked up her phone. It was buzzing like a hive. The lock screen showed over 100 missed calls. Every single one was from Vance family members. There were voicemails first, hesitant, then frantic. Ilara, it's your mother. Please call me back. We didn't realize then. Another sweetheart. It's Dad. We just saw the news. I think we should talk. And a message from Astrid of all people. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Can we please meet? I miss you. Ilara opened the group chat they had ignored for months. It was now flooded with images of Leo on TV, screenshots of headlines, and most surreal of all, messages filled with sudden admiration. Wellesley Tech, one red tech leader, said another. Her mother's final message stood alone at the bottom of the thread. We were wrong. Please let us make it right. Ilara put the phone down slowly. Leo walked in, loosening his tie. He looked at her face, then at the blinking screen, and raised an eyebrow. They saw it, he asked softly. She nodded all of it. He shrugged calmly. Told you the lighting at our wedding was good, but Ilara didn't laugh. Not yet, because this wasn't just about them. Finally seeing his success, it was about what they had been blind to before, the man he was, the husband he'd become, and the love they had dismissed simply because it didn't fit their social blueprint. She held up her phone, displaying the call list. What now? She asked him. Leo took the phone from her gently and set it aside. Now, he said, taking her hand, you decide whether they deserve a seat at the table. They walked away from, and Ilara, for the first time in her life, realized the power of having nothing to prove, only something to protect: her marriage, her peace, her truth. It had been a short time since Leo's face and Alara's wedding photo had aired on national television. Since then, the world had started to shift. Investors called, interviews were booked. The inbox was flooded with inquiries, but one unexpected knock came on a quiet morning. Alara opened the door of their apartment and saw them standing there. Serafina, Malcolm, and Astrid, all three impeccably dressed, as if they'd stepped out of a country club brunch and directly onto her doormat. Malcolm held a basket of wine and imported cheese. Serafina clutched a silk-wrapped box. Astrid had nothing but her phone, already recording in her mind. Alara, darling Serafina, cooed, stepping forward with an exaggerated smile. "We've been meaning to visit, so much has happened. We wanted to say congratulations in person." Alara stepped aside wordlessly. Leo stood in the kitchen, calmly stirring his coffee. He said nothing but nodded politely. Serafina floated into the living room, placing the gift on the table. We watched the interview. She said, glancing at Leo, "Quite impressive, truly. I had no idea you were doing all that." Malcolm chimed in, clearing his throat. "We're actually breaking ground on a new development outside Riverton Lux Eco Development. There might be a synergy with your HydroFlow Solutions tech. It's early stage, but we thought perhaps a collaboration could benefit both parties." He said the word collaboration like it had just occurred to him spontaneously. Though Alara knew her father didn't do spontaneity, Serafina turned to her daughter with a sweet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And now that you're married, we're family, isn't that what matters? Water under the bridge?" Alara looked from face to face. Their expressions, carefully curated voices, dipped in sugar eyes. Watching Leo more than her, she took a slow breath, then asked quietly, "And if he really were just a plumber, would you still be standing here?" The silence that followed was dense. Astrid laughed awkwardly, brushing hair from her shoulder. "Don't be dramatic." "Alara." Leo stepped forward, placing his mug down gently on the table. "We appreciate the visit," he said, tone calm but unyielding. "But we don't partner with people who use their own family as an investment strategy. HydroFlow Solutions was built on trust, not legacy. It's not for sale to those who failed to respect the people behind it." Malcolm's lips tightened, but he said nothing. Serafina's eyes narrowed. "We were trying to make peace, extend an olive branch. You'd reject." That Alara crossed her arms. "You didn't come here to make peace. You came to profit." There was another pause. Then Malcolm reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. "In that case," he said, placing it on the counter, "there's one more thing." Leo stepped back as Alara took it, opened it, and read the document inside. It was a legal declaration, a formal request for her to voluntarily forfeit her name from all Vance family estates and trusts, no inheritance, no land, no claims, the justification written in clean legalese to preserve brand integrity and public image in light of recent affiliations. Alara said nothing. Astrid looked down, suddenly avoiding her sister's gaze. "You're serious," Alara said softly. "We thought you might appreciate clarity. Malcolm said this way, you and your husband can continue your journey free of our shadow." Alara walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a pen, and without flinching signed her name on the bottom line. She handed the envelope back to him. "Now we're truly free." Serafina looked startled. "You don't even want to think about it." "There's nothing to think about," Alara replied. "You disowned me when I was inconvenient. You came back when I became useful. That's not love, that's leverage." Leo moved to stand beside her. His presence, steady in silence, said more than any argument could. Astrid gave a small shrug, then murmured, "Guess this is goodbye." Then Alara didn't respond as the door closed behind them. Alara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was final now, Izem. Official, she had let go of everything they dangled above her head for years. Approval, money status, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, the apartment felt lighter. Leo handed her the same mug of coffee he'd been sipping when they arrived. "You okay?" She smiled, a little sad, a little free. "Yeah, actually, I think I'm finally okay." Leo kissed her forehead good because now it's our turn to decide what family looks like, and this time, they'd build it on their terms. The phone rang just past the early hours of the morning. Alara stirred in bed, fumbling in the dark, as the screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen since the last confrontation. Astrid, her instinct was to ignore it. let it ring out like so many calls from the past, but something about the hour of the desperation in the repeated buzz made her press answer. Alara Astrid's voice cracked through the line, thin and shaking. I didn't know who else to call. Alara sat up. Leo still sleeping beside her? What happened? It's Oliver, the National Regulatory Agency came to our building. They froze our accounts. He's being indicted, securities fraud, wire fraud. I don't even understand all of it. His lawyer says he might be facing 10 years. They took our cars. Astrid, the apartment lease is in his name. They said I have 72 hours to vacate. Alara listened in stunned silence. I went to Mom and Dad. Astrid whispered, they won't even let me stay at the lake house, said it's too public. Too much press. Dad said it would tarnish the family that sounded exactly like them. I don't have anywhere to go, Astrid said, please. I just need somewhere to think, to breathe. I didn't know who else. The voice that once sneered at Alara's pathetic wedding now sounded like a child who'd lost her footing in a storm. Alara glanced at Leo, now awake and watching her. He didn't say anything, just gave a small, understanding nod. You can stay here, Alara said quietly. The next morning, Astrid arrived with a single suitcase and dark glasses, as if still trying to shield herself from the gaze of a world that had already turned away. Her heels clicked softly on the apartment floor, out of place in a home that wasn't staged, wasn't manicured, just real. She didn't cry, not yet. She just sat quietly at the edge of the guest room bed, while Alara poured her a glass of water. Thank you, Astrid whispered, looking down. Alara only nodded. Get some rest for a couple of days. Astrid barely spoke. She moved like a ghost. Polite, quiet, unsure. She offered to help clean, to cook, even though she didn't know where anything was. Alara let her be. Leo didn't pry on the third evening. Alara returned from work earlier than expected and walked past the guest room where the door was slightly ajar. Astrid was on the phone, her voice hushed but firm. Yes, Mother, I'm doing what you said. He likes me. He's kind. I can turn this around. If I can just get Leo to vouch for me, people will forget all this. He's the media darling now, isn't he? Wellesley Tech National News. If he says I'm family, we win the narrative. There was a pause. Then Astrid's voice dropped lower. No, she doesn't suspect. She still thinks I'm here because I need her. Alara didn't flinch. She quietly stepped away before the call ended, her heart sinking, not out of shock, but recognition. Astrid hadn't changed. Or perhaps she had, but not in the way that mattered. That night, Alara waited until the dishes were done, until Leo had stepped out to return a work call. She walked into the guest room where Astrid sat reading an old magazine. How long were you planning to play the part? Alara asked, softly. Astrid looked up, startled. When I heard the phone call, Alara said you told Mom you'd use Leo. You said I didn't suspect a thing. Astrid's face went pale. I let you stay here because I thought you needed a sister. Alara continued, but now I wonder, did you come because you needed me or because you needed what you thought I could give you? There was a long silence. Astrid's lips trembled. She tried to speak, but no words came. And then for the first time since she arrived, she cried. Not the performative tears that came with excuses and manipulation, but deep cracking sobs that shook her shoulders and bent her over in the chair. I don't know who I am anymore. She choked out when Oliver got arrested. I didn't even think about him. I thought about how it looked, how it made me look. That's how far gone I am. Alara stood there, arms folded, not cold, but steady. I built everything. Around appearances. Astrid continued, voice hollow, perfect man, perfect apartment, perfect reputation, and now all I have is a suitcase and a sister. I mocked. Alara walked over and knelt beside her. You have more than that, she said quietly, but only if you want to start over for real. Not for headlines, not for Mother's approval. Astrid looked at her mascara streaking her cheeks. You'd still help me. Alara nodded. Once I'm not like them, and neither are you, if you don't want to be. It was a small moment, but in that silence, something shifted. Not fully healed, not erased, but maybe something real had begun. It began with a headline tucked quietly into the business section. Whistleblower raises questions about Vance Development Group. At first, it went unnoticed. Malcolm Vance had survived worse market swings, zoning disputes, even tabloid rumors. But this was different within days. State regulators launched an official investigation into Malcolm's latest luxury eco-resort. Questions were raised about offshore funding shell companies used to secure favorable permits and suspicious land acquisitions. Documents surfaced: emails, wire transfers, inconsistencies in filings. The Vance name, long considered a pillar of prestige in Alderwood real estate, began to fracture in public. Then came the charity fallout. Serafina Vance, once hailed as the First Lady of Sustainable Giving, was quietly removed from the board of the Sterling Foundation. No press conference, no farewell gala, just a bland public statement citing philosophical differences and a desire to maintain ethical clarity, but everyone understood the subtext. It wasn't just that the Vances were losing influence, it was that no one was protecting them anymore. Alara read each headline with a complicated stillness. She didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat the pain her family had caused. Didn't disappear just because the consequences had arrived, but as the walls of silence and pretense collapsed around the Vance estate. Something in her relaxed. Not out of revenge, but out of release. One evening, Astrid sat beside her on the front steps of their modest garden apartment. The air smelled like rain. They're selling Hillcrest Manor, Astrid said. Alara turned seriously. Astrid nodded. Dad called yesterday. Property taxes are up. Legal bills are stacking. They have to let it go. That house was their trophy. Astrid let out a soft, tired laugh. I know it's strange. I thought I'd be devastated. But all I felt was quiet, like someone finally turned off the noise. Alara hesitated. Are they splitting the sale they offered? Astrid said. And I refused. Alara blinked. You what? Astrid looked at her sister with steady eyes. I was raised to think wealth was a shield, that if you had enough of it, nothing could touch you. But I've never felt poorer than when I had everything except peace. Alara said nothing for a while. Then she reached out and placed a hand over her sister's. No more words were needed inside. Leo was watching the evening news when Alara stepped in. He muted the TV as she sat beside him. They're losing the house, she said. And everything it stood for. Leo nodded slowly. I heard the investors are pulling out too. It's all unraveling. Alara looked at him, searching his face. How do you feel about it? He thought for a moment, then said gently, I'm not happy, Alara. I don't enjoy watching anyone lose what they've built, even if they never valued what truly mattered. She waited, sensing there was more. But I'm at peace, he continued, because you're not standing there waiting for them to take you back. You've already walked forward. Alara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the weight of those years, the striving, the rejection, the ache of being not enough, fade into something smaller, manageable, even forgivable. They spent their whole lives building a name. She whispered, and you built a life? He answered, and for the first time in the Vance family legacy, that was the better investment the day HydroFlow Solutions launched nationally. Alara stood beside Leo at the front of a crowded auditorium in Midwest Hub. Behind them, the logo they had drawn on a napkin some years ago now glowed across an LED screen. Engineers, city officials, environmental leaders, they had all gathered not just to see a new product, but to witness the future of water infrastructure. Leo stepped up first, speaking with the quiet authority he always carried. He explained how HydroFlow Solutions' grid system could save billions of gallons of water per year, restore decaying pipes across Middle America, and bring affordable smart infrastructure to neighborhoods that had been neglected for decades. When he finished, the applause was long and standing. Later that month, Alara received an invitation she never expected, an offer to speak at a major ideas summit in Metropolis. The topic was redefining personal worth in a world obsessed with status. She took the stage in a simple navy dress. No designer label, no personal stylist, just her voice. She spoke of what it felt like to be raised in a family where love was conditional, where worth was measured by optics, not truth. And she shared how she nearly believed them until someone showed her another way. I didn't marry a plumber. She said in her closing, I married a man who understood how systems break and how to fix them, including the ones inside families. The video went viral within days, but that wasn't the moment that meant the most that came. One quiet Sunday when she and Leo unveiled something small and deeply personal, a scholarship fund for low-income students pursuing engineering and technical trades. They called it the George Novak Fund. When asked about the name, Alara smiled and said, because one man showing up when it mattered changed everything. Astrid helped set up the foundation's first fundraiser, no longer the perfectly polished socialite she had traded heels for flats, designer clutches for practical shoulder bags. She now worked as a program coordinator for a local nonprofit helping single mothers learn job skills. Her smile had changed it, no longer asked to be admired. Their lives moved forward gently, not with the fanfare of fortune or fame, but with meaning. And then one bright afternoon in early spring, Ilara and Leo hosted their daughter's third birthday in the backyard. Balloons, a modest cake, folding chairs on the lawn. Nothing grand. Halfway through the party, a familiar car pulled up. Ilara turned from the picnic table as Serafina and Malcolm stepped out slowly. Dressed neatly but not extravagantly, Malcolm held a box wrapped in recycled paper. Serafina carried a children's book. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Malcolm said, "We don't expect anything, Ilara, but we wanted to be here if that's okay." Ilara studied their faces. There was still pride there. Yes, but dulled quieter, like something had softened that once refused to bend. They approached. Slowly, Serafina knelt beside her granddaughter, who clutched a toy screwdriver and wore a plastic hard hat. The child giggled. Malcolm smiled later as the cake was being passed around. Serafina stood beside Ilara and said almost in a whisper, "We're proud of you. Ilara, both of you." Ilara looked at her mother for a long moment. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel triumph. Just peace. She gave a small smile. "Thank you," she said. Then, after a pause, she added, "But the truth is, I don't need it anymore. Not out of bitterness, not as a weapon, but as a truth earned with time." That night, after the guests had gone and the stars blinked quietly above the house, Ilara stood beside Leo on the porch watching their daughter chase fireflies across the grass. "This is our legacy," he said, his voice low. Ilara nodded. "And this time, it's the kind we choose." So the man once mocked for being a plumber turned out to be the one who carried the Vance name into the headlines, but not in the way they expected. And Ilara, the daughter no one showed up for on her wedding day, proved that true worth isn't measured in applause or inheritance. It's in how we are after being dismissed. It's in how we build a life not from validation, but from values. This wasn't just a story about reputation. It was about choice. The choice to love instead of manipulate, to forgive instead of resent, to start again with nothing but your own two hands and a steady heart. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, if you've ever been underestimated, abandoned, or had to fight to define your own worth, I want to hear it. And if you believe that good people still deserve good endings, that quiet strength still matters in this loud world, subscribe to this channel, because here we tell stories that don't just move you, they remind you of who you are. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope you'll stay for the next journey too.